Well, thank you. Thanks for coming today. First day after a long weekend. I hope all of you enjoyed your long weekend. I know I did. I went and visited my mom back in Illinois. We have a little bit of a sprint for the rest of the quarter and then summer. So thank you for being here today and being about business. Well, I'm going to do a town hall today a little bit differently. I do have slides if anybody wants to see one. I have lots of slides if anybody wants to see any, but I wasn't planning on showing very many of them, maybe one or two if I kind of get tripped up and want to refer to some details about what I want to talk about. But what I plan to do is just have a conversation with you. Since all of you may not have been here in April when I did the town hall on budget, I wanted to review quickly what we talked about that day and then bring you up to speed with what's happened since that time. And then hopefully you all got the message last week, and I won't go over the details of that message, but I'll tell you kind of the background of how we got from April to that message and then where we are today. And then I want to use the rest of the time for any questions you have. And if the questions are difficult and over my capability to answer them, I have a team down here who hopefully knows the answers, folks that were with me in the room as we kind of worked through all of this. So is that what you're all expecting? I hope, because that's what we're going to do. So obviously we're here to talk a little bit about the budget. And in April, I told you that we were going to have some significant reductions. Some things happened that were different than what we were planning on happening. So therefore, being the stewardship team of the campus, being responsible and accountable to the state of Washington and to our president at the UW and our Board of Regents, we needed to take some pretty quick, decisive action to get our budget in line with what we could accommodate moving forward in this fall and into the future. So we did, I think, what we were supposed to do and what you would expect us to do, what you paid for us to do. But anytime you have to do something like that that we're not expecting, it's troubling, it's stressful, it's frustrating. And I'm sure a lot of you are stressed about it. And unfortunately, it's changing some people's lives because of the decisions we had to make. So to back up, we've been talking as a campus for ever since I've been here about the situation that was coming. We knew it was coming, and I could feel it when I walked in the door. We were spending really good stuff we were spending on, but we were spending to build a campus for the future. And I caused a lot of this. I came in and said, we've just finished 25 years. We had a big celebration. Let's think about the next 25 years and build a plan to build out the campus for the next 25 years. That's what we do here. We build. We make a campus that we're all going to be proud of. So I was a little concerned about the rate at that. And then after I took the job, the state did a good thing. They decreased tuition by 10%. Across the board, 10% less tuition. And already the state of Washington, I've showed you the background on this, is way down in the bottom of the list of tuition dollars that we charge as public institution for our peers across the state. We're in the bottom 10% or so. Likewise, the state of Washington is in the bottom probably 5% or so of what they give us in the allocation per student. So the University of Washington, regardless of what people think, was already running a pretty tight ship with respect to how much we get and what we do with that money they give us. So as I came in and saw that and then felt the 10% tuition cut, I knew that if we didn't be judicious in our resource utilization over the next several years, that something might happen. But I'm just as guilty as anybody. We had lots of good things to do. So we've been building campus. We've been moving forward. And then in fall 2017, when Ty joined us and Mentha joined us at the same time, one of the things that we really started getting down to business on is getting the whole campus up to speed so you know exactly what the budget is. Maybe not exactly, but you can find out whatever you want about the budget. We tried to make our budget more transparent to the campus and also more clear, understandable. It's one thing to show it to you, but it's another thing to help you understand it. So Ty got on that right away and has put together the budget primer, which explains how a lot of this works. He'll go anywhere almost anywhere you ask him to talk about how our budget works. I know he's gone to the students, he's gone to the faculty, he goes to faculty meetings, the various areas. He comes to my meetings. So he's willing to do that, and we're on that road of making the budget not only transparent, but also clear to all of you. Okay, so when he got here, he also began to help me be clearer on a few things. And if I was going to ask him to help me and the rest of the executive team be accountable for what we do here, because we were going to be tighter going forward, we had to make some changes to our budget. So last year, one of the things we were working on was this thing that I call right sizing. I don't know if you like that term or not, but that's what we started calling it, and I have trouble getting off of something once I start calling it something. So we were trying to right-size the budget, and I showed some slides back in April about how we were doing that. So every campus unit has a fixed allocation that they're responsible for that pays salaries and things, and then we give them a chunk of what we called summer money. My office was a recipient of a really nice chunk of summer money. I first admit I had a really nice chunk of summer money. So what we did as a campus, we took all of those distributions and put it in one pile in the middle, and essentially went back to each unit, academic units and administrative units, and put that money where we had identifiable budget priorities that were in line with what we were trying to do as a campus. So we were in the process of doing that, and then as far as the units are concerned, all money is the same. Doesn't matter if it comes from the state or from tuition or the summer money. We give you a budget, let's say $1 million, and then we hold you accountable to operate your unit at that $1 million, because at the end of the year, there's not going to be, a piggy bank to put money back into your unit. So the only way we could do that is to right size and hold everybody accountable for what their budget is. So that process was going along, and we had a target for saving a little bit. We thought when we distributed that, we could distribute it, take care of things, and there would be some left over that we could use as a margin for the campus. Okay? Well, when we got done, since that was very controversial to the units, I believe we, as an executive team, erred on the side of going ahead and doing things with the units and funding things that seemed important. So when we got done, the amount that we distributed was not less than we planned for. It was a little more than we planned for. And that was still going to be okay. And we talked about that in the fall, I think in November. When I did my town hall, I talked about that with you and told you our margin was going to be a little smaller than we hoped for because of that, but everything was going to be okay. But then what happened is I have a Chancellor's Budget Advisory Committee, and it meets just once a quarter, and it was meeting in February, I think, and we had invited a guest speaker. We had invited Mintha and Carl and I think Tori to talk about financial aid. And unfortunately, our two student leaders who are on my budget committee couldn't come that day, so it didn't make a whole lot of sense to do that presentation because they were the ones that asked for that presentation. So we decided not to do the presentation. Carl was sitting there, Ty was sitting there, I was sitting there. We began to just talk, and we learned that our enrollment for winter at the time was not going to be what we planned for. And that was the first I knew because we hadn't released the data yet. I get the data the same time you all get the data. So we what is it going to be? So we heard the projection, and it was much less, several percent less than we had planned for. And with the thing that had happened in the fall, with us using a little more of the summer money than we thought, that kind of was going to put us dangerously close if our enrollment did, in fact, and our retention also did, in fact, turn out to be what was now projected. We based our budget projection. You got to estimate at the beginning of the year how much tuition income you're going to get. We know pretty much what the state's going to give us once they act, and they've acted now, so we can estimate what they're going to give us next year, but you have to estimate your enrollment to be able to find out how much tuition you're going to get. So we had estimated 3%. We had planned as a campus for 4%, but we had estimated we can get 3% for sure, and we built our budget around that. So we were fine in the fall, 3.7 in the fall, but I think we were something like 1.7 in winter and 1.1 in spring. So you add those three numbers together, and really it's the sum, because what you're actually getting, you don't get paid tuition based on the number of students that show up in fall. You get tuition based on the combined number of students each of our quarters throughout the year. So when you take the 1.1, the 1.7, and the 3.7, it's more like 2% rather than 3%. So we were close to $1 million short there and had spent close to $1 million more than we had planned on right-sizing. So therefore, the things lined up, and we were going to be right on top of our expenditures being what our income was if we didn't do something for next year's budget. Because also next year we couldn't plan on 3% again, because the most recent information we had is it's about 1% right now, or 2% right now. So you can't say, oh, we're going to turn it around next fall. So we had to build the budget for next fall based on this new information. So based on that, you can't build a budget unless you reduce a few things, because there were significant requests that had come in that had to do with important things that are going on. At least the areas that asked for the request said these are very important. We evaluate those, and yes, those are important. We need to do that to move the campus forward. So to be able to do that, our only thing that we could do, which I've thought I probably needed to do since I've been here, is take some reductions. You can't keep doing new things unless you stop some of the original things you were doing. So each of the areas, so the 5 vice chancellors, information technology, advancement, student affairs, academic affairs, and finance administration, were each asked to go back to your areas and propose a 1.5% reduction, a 3.5% reduction, and a 4.5% reduction. Put it in a spreadsheet or put it on a piece of paper, however you want to do that. Go back to your areas, and then we'll all come back together as the vice chancellors group, and we'll look at those and talk about how your reductions would affect our area. And Ty actually led the way and proposed he go ahead and do his. He had been wanting to do those regardless of where we were with the budget anyway. So he took the lead and did a portion of this back in February or March? February? So the rest of us weren't prepared yet, so we had to get together. So my area, I don't just have the chancellor's office, I have strategy and assessment, equity and inclusion, and community engagement. So I was asked to propose a cut for that entire area of 1.5%, 3.5%, and 4.5%. So we did that, and we sat around in a room. Several times we met. We stressed about it. Your vice chancellors take this very seriously. They didn't want to let go of one person if they didn't have to. But when we got down to it, we couldn't do it just out of operation money. That we had some positions we really needed to not move forward with. So each area made their proposals, talked to the rest of us. If we don't do this, how is this going to affect your area? And then we made the reductions, and we got that all okayed with Human Resources and the Attorney General's office and the people that I report to, and then we moved forward with that early last week, and that's what you saw the message about. So the one slide I would like to show you is that we did make some significant reductions, and I'll show you what they are quickly. I don't want to dwell on it, but this is kind of the results of what we've done so far. Remember, we've only done these reductions in the administrative units because we felt like we had, I don't know if you want to use the word significant, but we had some overhead issues. We'd been building for a campus of maybe 10,000 or so, and the student population and other things have not kept up with what we were building for. It was a little bit of a lag behind, so we had to take a step back. And we believe that is kind of what the phenomena is that's happened here. So we thought it would be best for our teaching mission if we started in the administrative areas and did our reductions there. And we didn't just across the board say we're cutting every position or every area by 3% or 4% or whatever, because that's not a very strategic way to do it. That's why we proposed the 1.5%, 3.5%, and 4.5%, so we could work together to determine what things we could best accommodate and still move the campus forward. So what we did is these were the reductions in the areas, and there were requests in these areas, and there were a lot more requests. There were, I believe there were $4 million worth of new requests this year. So our campus does have an appetite for doing new things. I think it's healthy, but you have to say no to some of that. But we still have said yes to about $1 million worth of essential activities. We were really deliberate and very picky about what we all agreed is an essential thing to move forward. So the result of the reductions we made and the new proposed essential request is about $1 million reduction in the administrative areas, or 3.6% of our total expenditure. So I feel really good about that. That's a significant step to remove 3.6% of overhead out of these areas in one swoop, and it definitely feels. I mean, it hurts. The areas can really feel it. Finance administration, almost $1 million themselves. You see the 857 of reductions right there. So that's what we did. So let me stop for a minute, but I want to say one more thing before I stop. So I want to say two more things. First is I want to say thank you, because when I send a message like that, one of the things that can happen is I get a lot of negative feedback. That's just what happens when you're chancellor of a campus. I didn't get any negative feedback. I got really nice, heartfelt feedback, not because we were doing cuts, but people seemed to understand this was necessary and the thoughtfulness. So I got really nice messages from you about doing this, which it didn't make me feel, it made me feel better, but didn't make me feel better for the fact that we had to reduce some positions on campus. But it is something necessary for campus. So thank you for doing that. And you can scream at me and yell at me now in front of everybody, and I'll be okay with that. And the other thing I wanted to say is a lot of people are concerned because they think that the state got us out of hot water this time. They stepped forward, and the state stepped forward in a big, big way this year. So I don't want to diminish that whatsoever. We are very happy with what the state did this year with respect to the overall University of Washington and University of Washington Tacoma in particular. They did a heavy lift for us. One of the reasons that we're in this position is because since I've been here, the two most recent programs that we've done, biomedical sciences and electrical engineering, we did those on our own. So we hired new faculty, we equipped those labs. Everything we're doing in those programs, we've done those on our own, and the tuition that you get from those students in those programs in no way pays for those expensive of programs. So see, we can't do that anymore. I should have known better when I got here of doing those, but those were already in the pipeline. There was a lot of momentum behind them, and they've been wildly successful. I think there are more students in those programs than we can accommodate almost. So I'm not sorry that we did those. I'm really glad we did those, but they did affect our bottom line over time, so we couldn't do that anymore. So we have more expensive programs that this campus still needs, and two of them that were already on the books, not the academic books because our faculty approved programs, but they were on the books with respect to our capital ask. The new building that we're asking for was in the pipeline, and it said we had mechanical and civil and industrial, I think even had industrial engineering in the ask, and we didn't even have those programs funded yet. So if we didn't get those programs funded, our new academic innovation building could have been in jeopardy. So we needed to get those funded, but we couldn't do it ourselves. So we asked the state to fund them, and it was no easy thing to get the University of Washington to let us ask the state to fund those. So the folks that did that, Raj and Mike and Jill and Ty and Jan and Joel, who worked in the background to get those proposals forward, that was a heavy lift, and the UW let those go to the state, and they got approved. So that does not affect this, though. See, that's completely new stuff. That's new things that we're doing. Those faculty will be spent out of, or will be paid for out of that money. So it didn't affect this bottom line whatsoever. The other thing they did for us is they funded the design of that building. The design of that building, we'll take that money and it will go right to the engineering and architectural firm that does that. It does not affect this. That $4 million that they approved for a design of a building doesn't affect this. And then the last thing they did is, you may have heard me talk about it before, is what the state has been doing that's caused as another kind of hole in the bucket, I say. You know, we have a hole in our funding bucket because it doesn't get cheaper every year to teach our students. It gets more expensive. You know, the utility bills cost more, people cost more, so it gets more expensive. But actually, when the state authorizes raises for all of you, but doesn't fund those raises, that's like a leak in a bucket, because they authorize a 2% raise for all of you and only give us 1% worth of that raise money. So where do you think we get the other 1% from? Anybody? Where do we get it from? Nobody knows? We take it out of our hide, essentially. It has to come from everything else we do. So every year since I've been here, when they authorized a raise for us, they only give us a portion of that. So that sends us backwards. So the last biennium, they authorized a raise for us and gave us 1/3 of the money. And they gave every other four-year institution in the state half of the money. So we objected to that. We objected firmly to that. And it worked a little bit, so they funded that temporarily last biennium. It was about $7 million, and almost $1 million of that came to our campus. But we couldn't put it on your raise because it was one-time money. See, so that put us back almost $1 million. We had to go take $1 million out of these areas and the academic areas to fund that raise last year. Well, what they did this year, they went in and took that temporary money and made it permanent. So now we can put that on the books moving forward. So that does help, and we factored all that into this. So they did do that, and then they authorized a 2% raise for you this year, and they only paid half of it, but that's what we expect. So we'll still have that problem to fund the other 2%, and that's factored into the budget as well. This isn't the whole campus budget. This is just the administrative areas. If you go to the academic areas, there's the other 2/3, the academic areas and the other enterprise that we do. So now I will stop and take questions, or anybody have comments, or what do you want to talk about? I think we have microphones. Yes, on either side of the room. Who wants to be first? Right here.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm a student here, but also I'm part of the committee for the hiring process for the new Vice Chancellor for Student Experience.
Okay.
And I think my question is to you is, since we are cutting the Dean of Students, how do you expect for the new Vice Chancellor to take on the job of Kathleen's as well as the Dean of Students? Do you think that's justified, and what kind of impact do you see on the student experience, knowing that we are going to lose the Dean of Students and as well as a workload involved for the new person that's coming in?
Well, thank you for that question. And one of the things we did as we made these reductions, we did it as a team. And I had to rely on the expertise of the people in charge of these areas, and Mentha Hines-Wilson, who's sitting right here, convinced us that she knows how she's going to do that. So can you answer this question for us?
Thanks, and Hanan, that's a really important question. So long before the budget reductions were put into place, student and enrollment services began along this path of reimagining ourselves. What might we look like in the future? And a part of that, we decided we wanted to create a new position, the Associate Vice Chancellor for the Student Experience. Associated with that position, there was lots of discussion about who should report to that area, how are we going to function, what might that look like, and the Dean of Students position was slotted to report to the ABC. Now, when we had this unexpected situation happen, you saw that I was tasked with having to reduce the budget. So looked at a variety of scenarios, looked at different options. What might we be able to do? How are we going to make this happen? So at the end of the day, doing some research at other campuses, there are a number of institutions that function without a Dean of Students, one of them being the University of Washington, Seattle. So you're right, it is going to be a huge workload, potentially a huge workload, but it's not uncommon for a campus of this size to have an Associate Vice Chancellor. So those responsibilities that are attached to the Dean will roll up to the AVC, and some of the other responsibilities would be distributed to the Assistant Director and others. So we believe that's how we're going to be able to manage.
Thank you. Other questions? Over here.
Hi, Mark.
Hi.
It's not clear to me yet, and maybe you're still talking and going to share that, but so are we out of the woods, or are there more cuts coming? Are the academic units going to have to do something next? So where are we now, and what's next?
Yes, thank you for that question. I was going to talk about that if it didn't come up, but I knew that would come up as a question, so thank you for being the one to do that. So I am going to ask the academic units to do, I think I'm safest asking you to do the identical thing we did. For each of the 7 academic units to go however you do budget discussions in your unit. I don't want to tell you how you do that. I know you all report up through Dr. Purdy, and Jill will present to the Executive Budget Committee. But I want the academic units to go through a similar exercise to propose a 1.5%, a 3.5%, and a 4.5% reduction in your total budgets for your units. That will be your faculty budgets, your operation, your staff budgets, so on and so forth. There's a lot of complicated factors when you do that. If you go say, I don't want Professor X, Y, and Z, Professor X, Y, and Z probably have tenure or might be in a tenure track. We can't just do it that way. We have to look at openings, at things that you do and that maybe you no longer want to do. I'm going to leave that up to the areas. I've talked to Dr. Purdy about that, and she hopefully has been talking to the deans and directors about how that is going to work. I would like to lobby that we ask them to do exactly what we did. That doesn't mean that at the end we will do something that looks exactly like this, but I think going through that process will be healthy for each of our units. It was healthy for us. So that's what I'm asking to do. So Dr. Purdy with the 7 deans, we can call them deans pretty soon because you know the good news about our 3 academic units becoming schools, to initiate a process in the units, and I would suspect that you would do that somehow in conjunction with your faculty councils. Everybody will have to be involved. So we need to get started now because here we are, what is this, May 28th, and we're just getting finished with this. And this we had to do a little faster than we would have liked to. We did this, it doesn't seem fast, but we did this in about 3 months. Here we have 11 months to start doing this. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
You want to follow up? Wait, before you follow up, bring the microphone.
Yes. But I guess I'm not clear on, so it sounds like you said 11 months, so we'll start this for the next fiscal year?
Yeah, for the next fiscal year.
Very good, thank you.
This is this fall. Yeah, we had to do it because, you know, the budget is here. We had to meet with the provost and the president in April. Was it April 4th or April something? First week of April. I forget what day it was. We had to meet with them and tell them and get okay from them with what our budget plan was for next year. So we didn't have the individual numbers here. We just met with them and told them we had to have a bottom line in our administrative areas that would be about $1 million less than our bottom line in our administrative areas are right now. And it will definitely involve some layoffs. And they approved that process and asked us to work with HR and the AG's office as we continue through the process. So we had to okay this back in April, and I wouldn't have done that to the academic units without pre-warning. So now, though, as an academic unit, and Jill knows, I've talked to her, as an academic unit, you're being warned. That's all not warned, being asked. You're being asked to be prepared, prepare yourselves to go through an exercise like this for the coming year, because no, we're not out of the woods. The diagram I did in April showed that our 2 numbers were going to cross over, our expenses and our income, but if we do these reductions, 2 years in a row, we can move that line down some, and then if we work really hard on our retention and our enrollment, we can move the other line and get back to where there's a little space between there. So we're all going to have to work together. If you read that letter carefully, there are 3 things that we have to do. We have to stop another leak in the bucket, and that's students who come and don't continue, our retention. We have to make sure that all students are aware of what great things go on here, and with the new state need grant fully funded, we want to make sure we go to every little location around the state and the surrounding areas so people are aware. A lot of people and families don't realize college can be in their future. So we've done a really good job explaining that to our community, but we need to take that message further. So we're going to do all that, and we're going to do these efficiency reductions to kind of make ourselves more lean. So we're going to work on all 3 of those and get ourselves back. If we don't get some space between those 2, it limits everything we do. Any initiatives that we do as a campus, any capital projects, our deferred maintenance just goes further and further. And so far, our campus is in pretty good shape because it's only 29 years old. A lot of our campus, Tacoma Paper and Stationery Building, is only 2 years old. But going forward, the campus is going to start needing, a wheelchair and a cane and things like that as it gets older, and that's expensive, and we don't have any way to fund that right now.
Hi there.
Yes.
Jim Gowell. So my question actually is about this budget, and
Yes.
I recognize the numbers all add up, but it doesn't actually give us the detail as to what positions were cut, what areas were cut. It just kind of categorizes them into things that make it hard to understand what you actually deemed expendable and what you deemed not. And so it's really important, I think, for these budgets to actually show what it is that you actually cut, not just the overall numbers. And I think that's also goes with academic units later on, is that it's important not to just cut in categories that kind of use those 01, 02 type of things. It needs to say that we're not supporting this initiative or that initiative, whatever it is, or this position. This kind of budget doesn't really tell us that detail.
Yes, and that's not the purpose of this. And, we usually don't talk about names or specific positions in an all-campus email. That would be difficult for the people whose names or position was there. I can tell you, though, it's no secret. I don't know if we want to go through that now. We probably don't want to go through that now, but it's not a secret. 3 or 4 of those positions, there was nobody in them, so we cut the position. I can say in my office, the receptionist position that was Sylvia, you all probably remember Sylvia, we eliminated that position. So we just have a couple student workers now in the Chancellor's office. So that was one of the positions we eliminated in my office. Another position I can talk about because there's nobody in it was we had approved another analyst position for our strategy and assessment office. We had approved that over a year ago, and now we're not moving forward with that position because we just can't. So those were my reductions, those 2 positions plus that summer money allotment in my office. And I can tell you what my $58,000 there is. The $58,000 I'm putting back in, give me 1 second to put this back on. The $58,000 I'm putting back in is, some of you may be aware that our YMCA contract is a little bit strained because it was written for a more rapid growth on our campus than we actually have experienced. So we've actually, the past 2 years, had to pay a deficit at the end of the year to the YMCA, and that's really difficult on us. So we've been renegotiating that contract, and it's difficult to renegotiate a contract that's signed for a number of years when it's in favor financially of one of the 2 parties. Like, why would they want to do that? But they're our partner, and we've worked out a deal. And part of working out the deal is we are going to take care of the HVAC and hot water heater, so the building maintenance on that facility, we're going to take care of that because we already have staff, and it's easier for us to do that. So I'm putting $50,000 into facilities budget to make sure there's ample money to take care of that as part of this negotiation. So those are an example of the new things that we just kind of got to do to make things work for the future. So Jim, or Professor Gow, sorry, I'd be happy to tell you the positions if you come by my office, but I don't want to talk about each of those positions. Some of the people might be in the room, I don't know.
So this is Lisa Hoffman. I'm going to just do a follow-up question to Jim's. I don't think we want to hear about specific people. That's too painful. But I do think we're asking about the values and the priorities that were used to make the decisions.
Yes.
And so in addition, if we could understand those values that were used to cut certain things in the different units. And an obvious one from a faculty point of view is the reduced central support for research and scholarship and creative work. And so we need to understand where these decisions are coming from, why they're being made, et cetera. So I think some kind of more general things about what's behind these numbers, but not people.
Yeah. Well, let me take a stab at that, Professor Hoffman. We use first and foremost the strategic plan, but then when it got down to it, the strategic plan is kind of broad. It covers all areas of our campus, growth, culture, all those things. But we really looked on student success, and you can't have student success without faculty success. Now, I don't believe in fact, I know we're in no way diminishing our research support at this campus. That is something that I value and I want to increase going forward. One of the things we are doing on campus, though, is also support that we didn't have before, that you're very aware of, support for community engagement that doesn't usually bring, overhead and what do you call the extra money you get from a research project? Yeah, the indirect cost. Seldom do we get indirect costs when we do community projects. It's usually with a nonprofit or something like that, and we didn't have a lot of support for that. So we're building support for our faculty that do community engagement or engage scholarship, but we're not taking that from research. We're building our research enterprise. I think Dr. Purdy is rearranging it somewhat. You might want to step in. Jill, do you want to say something about that? Sure. Can we get a microphone for Dr. Purdy?
Yeah, the reprioritization is really what's happening. I would hate to see it be framed as a cut to research, when in fact it's a reprioritizing away from an administrative level position to a service level position. For those faculty on our campus who have sought sponsored research grants, particularly federal grants, the lack of post-award support on this campus has been a significant problem that Tehran, as AVC for research, has heard about for several years in his position. And by shrinking that position somewhat, it allows us to provide funding for a position that will provide post-award grant support within the Office of Research. It also allows us to expand our focus and recognize that for as much as we have been successful and grown in terms of sponsored research on this campus over the past 3 years, much of which I think should be credited to our Office of Research and Tehran's leadership, of course, our faculty's excellence. There are lots of people on this campus who don't do that kind of research, that they are working in a field or an area where it's unfunded and there's not easily available funding, or it's funded by a community group or a foundation or industry or contract or even a gift. And we should recognize that our research and scholarly enterprise across this campus in particular, which makes it very different and distinctive from our sister campus up the road in Seattle, is that we are indeed supported by our Office of Advancement. We are indeed supported by our new Office of Community Partnerships. And those are not coming out of the Office of Research funds that used to be there. They are additional supports. So I think, in fact, the support for research as a result of these changes has shifted, and there has been some reorganization, but it's probably more rather than less.
Yeah.
Hi, so this is Libby Sunderman, and I am one of the people that wrote you, and I got a response, but I wanted you to clarify it a little bit more. This is actually from the last town hall, which I watched. I didn't see it live. And I just want to read what it says so I make sure I'm getting the language right. You
Sure.
said this is about the academic units and what you were going to ask them to do, and said, make sure before we renew a faculty position that this faculty position is going to contribute to to our academic planning going forward. And I have a specific reason for asking this. I represent lecturers a lot. I do in my own unit, and this really scared lecturers, that whole idea of renew, because we have renewable contracts. So I just wonder if you could clarify that statement a little bit more.
Sure. And in the academic areas, I, for one, won't be proposing anything except what I just said, the 1.5, the 3.5, 4.5. I will ask that academic area to work on that. But one of the things that I asked Jill before she moves her positions forward, because one of Jill's annual things that she has to do is go to all the areas and come up with new faculty or replacing faculty that have retired and asking to renew those positions. So I asked her, are these needed? So yes, I will be asking her for every faculty position that comes for, and her colleagues too. It won't just be me, it'll be me and Mentha and Josh and Ty. We'll all be asking her to make sure we're not propagating a situation where we're having a declining number of students but still replacing retiring faculty. So that's all that we will ask. But the proposals come from the units. There's no secret strategy to reduce lecturers or anything like that in the future. That will be the academic units proposing inside their shared governance ways that they do things, what to do going forward. So I'm glad you came and asked me that question in public, because I want to go on record of I'm not going to micromanage what's going on in the areas. So, did you want to add anything to that? Okay.
Hi, Mark. This is Ann Bartlett, Dean of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences. And I have to say, I'm kind of disappointed to hear that we're going to have to go through these exercises. Arts and Sciences has been really underfunded for many years, and we just had the opportunity to create a budget this year for the first time. And the idea that it might have to be scaled back is very disappointing. You mentioned that tuition from biomedical sciences and electrical engineering didn't cover the costs of offering the degrees. And I'm wondering if there's any thought of maybe scaling back on mechanical engineering and civil engineering, since those also are likely to be far more expensive than they would be to offer.
Well, that money for fund those is provisoed from the state. We got the exact amount of money that we need to teach those programs from the state in a new allocation.
Does that include the general education courses?
That does not include the general
all
education.
Of the, and the math
and
and
it does
everything
not
else.
include the
So
library.
it's not, I mean, I'm just saying, it's not exactly.
Yeah. And we had those in the proposal at the beginning. And as the process went through, we were asked to take them out to scale back on that and just ask for the positions in those areas.
So I'm worried that the students will be able to take their physics and their chemistry and writing and all of the other courses that they need to take.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be difficult, but that's what we'll use the tuition for, because these will be new students. So you'll have new students paying tuition for mechanical and civil engineering. We have complete funding for all the new faculty that will teach them. We have the funding for the building, so their tuition can be used across the board then to fund other things, the library, physics, chemistry, I assume biology. I'm not sure exactly what all they will take, but a lot of it will be in your area.
Have we thought about differential tuition, charging more for very expensive degrees?
Oh, I would love to have differential tuition. Yes, we've thought about that, but the state of Washington has not allowed anybody to do differential tuition to this point. You can imagine Seattle's tried that before too. One of the reasons they don't is because of that savings plan they have. What's it called? Yes, GET. That would complicate the statewide savings plan, so they've never allowed us.
So, and just very last, I'm just wondering if you might allow sort of a budget committee, a budget advisory committee that would include faculty moving forward.
Of course, I will take input from anywhere. Since I've been here, I've worked with each faculty assembly chairperson to propose how they want to do the budget. That's why we changed the budget committee this year, is because Lauren Montgomery last year as chair was one of the leaders in asking that we change the way we do the budget committee. So we did that this year. So if there's a good proposal, I'll take it back to EBC. We're going to interact with faculty assembly all year long on this. So I don't know exactly what you're asking for, but of course we'll consider what you're proposing.
Hi, this is Julie Eaton. I'm in SAM Division. I was hoping to understand an update on the planned rearrangement of the CEI, TLC library, and all of those entities in the Snoqualmie and Tioga complex, especially in light of the budget constraints. This seems like a very expensive project to undertake.
Yes. Well, we've put that a little bit on the back burner because the same people that are managing that were also working on the budget. So we do have a proposal from the engineering firm that was here that met with everybody, and the proposal, yes, was too much money for the entire process. So we've sent them back to the drawing board, and it's just going to be how much longer before we start talking about that as a campus again? Very soon. Couple weeks? Couple weeks. We'll get back to that. Now that we submitted the budget, we'll go right back to that. It's still a high priority for us, and we're going to do it, but we just had to do this first.
So what's, do you have any information now on a timeline, especially if we're going to get information in a couple of weeks? A lot of us are going to be traveling over the summer, and we're not going to have an opportunity to give in-person input on changes. So is there a planned time in which this will happen?
Ty, is there a timeline for?
I can't speak to that.
You can't speak to that right now?
But we certainly intend to incorporate everybody's concerns.
Yeah. So what Ty said is he can't speak to it right now because, again, Ty has been completely helping with this budget situation, but we'll get the conversation completely back out there. Everybody, we're not going to rush that project. It just had to be put on hold for a little bit. We are not going to rush it.
Okay, and so my final question in that line is, I think it's great that we're starting more engineering programs, and there's the fundraising that you talked about in the last town hall about that. And it sounds like, based on Dean Bartlett's question, that the funding is strictly for that program and not the supporting programs such as Gen Ed.
Yes.
Was any funding put aside for other programs like CEI or TLC or library, because those students will also be placing additional demands on those support structures?
And the answer is yes, we thought of all that, and we built a proposal that went to our colleagues in Seattle to fund all of those things, but what we ended up taking forward was only the faculty that will teach in those programs. So they were stripped out of the original proposal. But we moved it forward because we thought it would, the tuition part can help cover those. To get the state to fund something like this for the first time is so important for our campus. This is kind of the future for us. We can't continue to grow as a campus and have new programs without getting money from the state. So the opportunity to put something forward that we felt like the state would step up, and a STEM degree is an important one that the state would have an appetite for. So this is a major thing for us. So they said yes, and they're funding it fully. The state didn't cut it back. Our colleagues in Seattle cut it back before it went forward. But that, I would expect that because they had things they wanted to put forward too. And it's always a balance. If they're going to put forward, a $10 request, and we have $5 of it, that's not going to bode well on the Bothell campus and the Seattle campus. So they got to kind of manage the process and get equal chunks for each of us. So this is really a good deal. And we have a new provost now who is willing to let us as a campus move forward and go directly to the state, not only for new programs, but ask the state if they would be willing to better fund our campus at the foundational level. Now, just because he is willing to have that conversation does not mean it's going to happen. Guarantee it does not automatically mean that. But it's great news to me to have a new provost who is wondering why we, as this campus, who represents kind of the future growth, because there's no possibility for growth at Bothell or not much at Seattle. But we have the potential here. So to have a provost that's willing to do that this is a step in the right direction. So I wasn't willing to ditch that effort because everything lined up and it was successful. So.
Can I have one follow-up question?
Yes,
from
of course you
okay.
can.
So then my follow-up question is, given the tight resources from getting money from the state and tuition,
Yes.
It seems like some of these projects we could also ask the community for. Are there any plans to do local fundraising for some of these things that will help
Oh, yeah.
our students succeed?
Yes, we work with our community quite a bit. I think it's something you don't see so much, but we've been working for our community, with our community for the 5 years of the campaign, behind the scene. 7 years? How many years, Josh? 7 years in this campaign. And for instance, this building we're getting ready to build, the state is going to fund $40 million. They gave us $4 million for design and $36 million is the plan for construction. It's a $57 million building. And we are going to raise the other 17 from our community. We have community members that we're going to ask to help us fund the equipment. The electrical engineering, we paid for that equipment ourselves. The biomedical sciences, we paid for that ourselves. We can't do that anymore. So we have people we're going to ask, and I have all faith that it's going to work. We have $8 million of that 17 already pledged. Can you do that in the microphone, Josh? Or?
The fundraising through the course of this campaign hasn't only been about this new building.
Right.
And so we've got 2 career services centers, the emergency aid programs, student scholarship funding. So there's a whole sort of portfolio of different fundraising opportunities that have been funded over the course of the last several years. So, and continue to work hard on that as well.
Yeah, the fundraising we do is like a matchmaking exercise. We have folks in the community who have philanthropic cultures, but they have specific interest, and then we have faculty administrative needs. Josh and his team work really hard to match those up, and they've been very successful. If you've been here before, you know we passed our goal of $45 million last August. We've stretched it to $55 million, and we're at 51.5, and probably going to head towards 65 million maybe. Joel.
I just wanted to clarify, we only paid for a third of the electrical engineering lab equipment. Tektronix donated 2/3 of it.
There you go. Thank you very much. So you can see how that works. Yeah. Oh, we have a question.
Great. Just to follow up, Joyce Dingleson Panlilio, I'm currently the Division Chair of Science and Mathematics, and
Yes.
so I share the worry that Dean Bartlett had mentioned about you asking us to go through the cut exercise for the next fiscal year. And so really the biomedical sciences, as you mentioned, is a high demand program, and we're running pretty lean. And so the worry that I really have right now is if and I fully understand that Dean Bartlett will call me and say, Joyce, run through seeing what these cuts would look like. And that now really impacts directly, I think, their student experience. And so what I want to hear, I guess, from you is, are we ready to literally be telling our students that there's no room in these classes that you want to get into as a result of potentially these cuts that we need to make? And that's literally where we're sitting at within the science and mathematics. Our fill rates are pretty up there. And I've been fortunate, and I've been getting pretty good at the exercise of begging both Dean Bartlett and Dr. Purdy about, like, we need another section of chemistry, we need another section of organic chemistry or biology or whatnot. And they've been being able to at least provide those sections to the benefit of our students. But given these sort of projections, I worry that we won't be able to do that anymore. And are we really ready to say essentially that to our students, that, sorry, there's really no room for you here?
And the answer is absolutely not. We're not going to do that. One of the things I don't like about stagnant enrollment growth or budget cuts, it gets people thinking that we're not in the mode of growing this campus for the future of the South Sound. And once people get that in their mind, it's hard to get over that. So the answer is no. We're asking you to go through an exercise where you propose 1.5, 3.5, and 4.5, and you see, well, let me put it back up there, that we didn't cut 1.5, 3.5, or 4.5 from any area. If you look at information technology, it actually had a budget increase this year because of a similar situation. We had been taxing them over and over and over, so even though they did some reductions, they actually got a budget. I can't point to here. Maybe this works. Yeah, they actually got new things, or not new things, but they got additions to help do that. So it could very well be next year, if we propose the 4.5, we use some of somebody else's 4.5 to pay science. Or, now I could get in trouble. I'm not going to make that decision, but we as a campus can decide to do that. We are not going to try to send students away. That's not the intent. But if we don't get things on the table, we can't make those decisions. If we don't get things on the table, and Dr. Bartlett doesn't work with you and her faculty to propose what you could let go of if you had to and what the consequences could be, then you got people like me going in with a pair of scissors, and you don't want that. So I need to start with you all proposing what you could live without and telling us as an executive team, and Jill works closely with the deans and the directors in the area, tell us what the consequences will be, and you just have to trust us, and maybe you can't do that, but trust us to make the best decision for this campus. This is what you pay us to do, is make these decisions. So, I don't know. That's what I have to say about that. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something? Yes.
So as I'm scanning the room, I'm seeing that there are students, and before folks head off for class, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. So this absolutely is a somber moment for our campus, and we are definitely feeling it over in student enrollment services. So individuals who are near and dear to us as colleagues and as mentors, as friends, students who have worked very closely and developed a rapport with these folks are hurting and trying to understand and rationalize how all this could happen. What I want to say to the student community is we've been thoughtful, or attempted to be thoughtful, in sending multiple communications so you understand what has happened. I've had a meeting with all of our staff to talk about the rationale and how it is that we came, or that I came to the conclusion that we came to. And then also for the students who are going to be impacted, who have relationships with individuals, we are working to put together safe space so students can come together, process it, talk about it, cry, mourn, be angry, whatever is needed so folks can move through that process. So that is in the developmental stages. I do want to acknowledge again, this is really, really hard. It was hard and is hard for me too. I have to believe that our campus is going to come through this. I have to believe that with the support and camaraderie and grit and resilience of this campus, we can make it through. So, these are difficult times now, and I know folks are angry at me. I am not the favorite person in the mattress factory right now, and I get that. And I probably won't be the favorite person for a very long time. But at the end of the day, we are focused on enrollment, transitions, and success. And those were the three factors that I had to consider in making the decision. So students, I'm available. My door is always open, always has been. Feel free to come by, we can talk it out, but also know that staff are in the process of planning activities, so there can be a private, safe space for folks to come together and talk it through. Okay.
Thank you, Mitha. Other questions?
So I had a question about
Yes.
the reductions and the proposed increase in budget with IT. I know, I'm Mark, I'm a media producer in IT, and I know we lost 1.4 full-time employees, but I see that we actually gained in the budget. So I'm curious how those cuts are going to affect our service levels on campus, and if it's being made up for in the proposed budget increase, specifically in IT.
And I don't know if Patrick is in the room. Is Patrick in the room? Patrick, do you want to address that question?
Again, like Mentha and other my colleagues says, this is very difficult time for myself personally, also for the people who report to me with their meeting to talk about it. It's the situation that I also discuss a lot with the Chancellor, how the cuts has to be, we have to model the 1.5, 3.5, 4.5, and this has to be everybody looking at our area. What we have to certainly reduce some of the services like the very late evening is one thing that we had staff until 10:30 that we have to cut back to like 7:30 at most 8 o'clock at night. We also had to slow down some of the perhaps coding design services, but only slow down only. And also, more importantly, Ty and I also talk, and he actually proposed and will help me with some of the finance formula tracking of the budget and the fiscal services. So also I'm trying very hard to not actually potentially not really lay off anybody and keep them on staff. It's not always successful. We had plans and not working out, but that's the situation. And when you said actually the thing I also discovered the Chancellor is that is really, as you point out, is right sizing. Is some of the thing is not really, I asked for new services, it's been historically, that wasn't funded correctly through our budget with something else, maybe I can explain even better. But when he pointed out to me, yeah, we didn't have that, and he had to add that to fund even some of our salaries that way. That's a situation that appeared to be we are proposing a larger amount. Yeah. So we are trying to offset that very much. So we're not really gaining much of anything. It's really to use the term that, Mark, you used, it, right sizing, all the activities that we have been doing. That's what we are trying to do.
Yeah, and I'll kind of vouch for Patrick there. He was caught into a situation, many of us were, and I think Dean Bartlett referred to this too, where the budgets hadn't been appropriate in the past. And that's what we did, is we took the summer money and went and made those budgets appropriate where we could. And Patrick's budget was one of those kinds of budgets. So this new money over here was putting it there so that IT could be whole, so to speak. That's what we call right sizing. But even though it's whole and he had to do significant reductions, is we're already in a bad situation. We used to replace everybody's technology something like 3 years and classrooms every 3 years, and now we're stretching that out. It's 4 years and 5 years, and you know how fast technology goes. So we're still not out of the woods with any of these budgets. Yes? Chris?
Hi. So I'm curious a little bit about the growth.
Yes.
So right now we're heading into austerity. We're cutting back. What are we going to do about growth? And I know that the economy is strong. That usually means enrollments dip overall or stagnate as they have. Mm-hmm. What are the new, let's think of it as a business. Where are new customers coming from? Yeah. What are we doing about that, and what are the plans? Does it include international? Does it include other options? And where are the people going right now? Are they going directly into the workforce, or are they going to other universities or into other institutions? How are we addressing those issues?
Chris, all of the above. So I told you there's 3 areas. There's the efficiency gains, and we're all going to work on those through these reduction processes that we've talked about. We've charged a committee that's led by Bonnie, Dr. Becker, that is working on retention with some folks in Memphis area, and that committee is working around the clock to come forward with some proposals to help increase retention. I talked about that. And at the same time, Carl, who's our Chief Enrollment Officer, or Chief Admissions Officer, and his committee has worked on an enrollment plan. It's very sophisticated, and it involves all those things that you said about. It's draft right now. It's been presented to the executive team and involves all of those things. Looking at our international population, one of the things that's going to be difficult there is if we get a residence hall or not. So I'm working on getting us a residence hall with Ty and Mentha and other people. And looking at out-of-state enrollment growth, Eastern Washington, there is a plan, but the plan has different pieces of it. So what we're going to do in the summer, we're going to have a retreat, and we're going to look at that plan and see what we can do inside our current resource base, because we've just made some of these reductions, so this work has to come from somewhere. And then when we really believe that particular strategy could take us forward, where can we get some additional resources to deploy into that area to move those things forward? So we have a draft plan, and we're going to act on it right now. Mintha, you want to say anything else about that? Yes. Can somebody get, okay.
So in addition to that, there will be a town hall meeting. So this is going to be a collective effort. So it's not something that's going to rest solely on the shoulders of the admissions office or what have you, but it's got to be the entire campus engaged at every single level. As Mark said, we've got some really strong data that says students that are coming and enrolling their first year, there's a significant drop-off. So what is contributing to that? What is the plan that we can put in place to help students come back and get back on task? So that's one element of it. In terms of enrollment, Carl has been looking very strategically at a variety of variables, from the market forces to what's happening in the community colleges, what have you, demographic shifts, and has developed a plan that's being discussed by the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellors currently. The next step is to take that iterative process and bring it before the entire community so we can have a town hall discussion. He solicited input from the deans and from the directors and others. So again, this is a comprehensive approach. We're going to keep it in front of everybody. So again, it doesn't just rest on the shoulders of one or two individuals, but we as a community recognize how vital it is that all of us are engaged in this effort. It has to be ongoing. Recruitment, enrollment, retention. Recruitment, enrollment, retention, success. So stay tuned for a town hall meeting that's forthcoming.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Thanks. Could you, I think that this, that you did at a previous town hall, or it might have been in Ty's presentation, can you re-explain what summer money means? Because in my mind, that when I hear that, I think of like, oh, this is extra stuff that we're just going to toss out places, but I think it means something different, and that might help me understand maybe some other follow-ups. Like, what does that mean, and then how was that? You said that that was given out last summer to help with the right sizing? Is that
Yes.
where that?
So I'll explain it. I do better with some audio visuals, but this late in the town hall, I don't want to get my audio visuals out. I think everybody will dash out of the room if I do that. But essentially, the way the campus is operated, and I've worked on other campuses that operate this, and it almost always causes issues, is we did our budget essentially on the 9-month window. So we got the tuition and we got the allocation from the state, and we essentially held people accountable for this much money for these 9 months. In the summertime, you generate funds from your summer enterprise. You teach classes, you pay those folks and all that, but there is overhead or profit. I hate to say profit, but there is. You spend less than you bring in the summertime, but that's done as a separate total economic enterprise. It was actually managed by Continuum College in Seattle. So it's a separate enterprise. The money doesn't get mixed. So when the summer was over and we found out how much the overhead was, that was distributed all across campus. Mintha's shop got some, Ty's shop got some, the academic units got some, I got some, but it was just given to you. So they would give me $300,000 and I wasn't accountable for it. So the following year, people would ask the Chancellor's office for everything, and we'd try to fund what we could until the money was gone. That's not the way to run a university. So what we've done is taking what we think we can do in summer, and we're just adding that to the tuition and the allocation from the state, and it's one big pot. All the money is green, so it's like $70 million or something. It's all together, and then we budget student affairs out of the entire pot, and we ask Mintha what she needs to run the operation as it is today, and we give her that much money, and then we hold her to that. So that's what we've tried to do. Okay. Instead of you just getting money handed to you and nobody asking you what you did with it, we give you the money to make your budget, and that's all.
Okay. So there's more accountability for that money?
There's more accountability. Okay. So even though we spent a little bit more, now moving forward, we can hold people accountable for what they have. Okay. Okay, and if they want more, they have to ask for it, and it has to go through a process. If they overspend, I don't know what's going to happen if they overspend. I guess they go down to Commencement Bay, I would throw, I don't know.
Okay, yeah. No, that helps because it was a little hard to hear. And I know that it's not like just from these two things back to back, right? Like there's a lot of years of stuff leading up to this point, but just that it sort of was seeming like, oh, we gave people a bunch of extra money this summer and then we realized, oh, we haven't enrolled enough and now.
No,
we're
I
in
don't
this
think that's
situation.
happened.
Yeah.
But now that we've built summer into our overall
Yeah, no,
budget,
that's
we don't want to have a catastrophic failure where we don't recruit students for summer school.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up,
Yeah.
which I think you answered of what is the plan going forward, so that we're not just reverting to, oops, like now we're going to make cuts, right?
No.
Like obviously that's
No, so
not, I know that's not what anybody wants to do, so.
No.
And then another, I don't know if it's a follow-up or just a totally separate question, just of what the total deficit was that we had this year when we knew that that it was going to be coming tight. And I know confusion that I've had and that I've heard other people saying is in the latest email, and what we can see here was $2 million in reduction. But when first this was getting talked about, it was a $1 million deficit that we were first told. And then it's like, wow, that's a really big change to go from 1 to 2. And so is that to account for like these other proposed requests? Like I can see we cut $1 million, but we're adding back in $1 million.
We cut $2 million.
Or sorry, yes, thank you. We cut $2 million, but we're adding back
Yeah, but
in.
Elizabeth, these are only the administrative areas. I only showed the administrative areas so you could see firsthand that we did indeed cut across these areas, but not equally in each area. You can see that Ty's area went down 6.6% total. You know, so I showed this for that purpose. So some of those numbers that don't match up is we're talking about the deficit probably for the entire campus, which is over a 70 million. Is it 73 or 72? And here, the 25 and 45 is about 70. This number down here, 45, I just wanted to tell you that about 2/3 of the budget is in the academic areas.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's no funny accounting going on. You're just looking at different things. We don't have a rug that we push money under somewhere, so. Yeah. What other questions? Do you feel better or do you feel worse? Has this been helpful? Okay. Well, I won't belabor it. I will let you go, but I'm free to talk if somebody wants to come and ask me a question, and you'll hear more from us as we go along. Yeah. Thank you.